The journey to Mount Autorten in Russia's Ural Mountains was supposed to take the hiking group a few weeks. They had no reason to expect otherwise. But the hikers never reached their destination. Searchers found the bodies in a disturbing state, hundreds of yards away from their well-stocked tent, which had been cut open from the inside. Some were shoeless and nearly naked in the snow, as if they had escaped in a fearful hurry. According to diaries recovered from the site, February 1, 1959, was the last night the hikers spent at the camp. 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a radio engineering student at the Ural Polytechnical Institute, had invited colleagues from his university to join him on the trip to Mount Autorten in the remote northern Urals. They set off in late January after traveling to their trailhead by train, bus, and sleigh. After completing the journey through the mountainous wilderness, they would have qualified for the highest hiking certification granted in the Soviet Union. One hiker, Yuri Yudin, left early in the trip, on January 28, due to a flare-up of sciatica. He had made it to the trip's final leg, getting out to the Ural Mountains by sled, but had to ride back on the sled to return home. He was disappointed to leave. But this decision would ultimately save his life. After trekking through deep snow and thick pine forests for several days, a storm forced them off their route, and they set up camp on the slope of a mountain called Kolatsayakul. Whatever happened next caused them to cut through their tent and escape in a howling blizzard without proper footwear or clothing. Investigators knew the hikers understood the danger of being stranded in the wilderness in winter without food or shelter. So why had they died from hypothermia in 6 of the cases so close to camp? And why had many of them left the tent naked without even putting on shoes? An avalanche would answer these questions. But there are many reasons why people have resisted it, the biggest of which being no signs of an avalanche. The abandoned tent was torn open and covered in snow but not buried as it would have been in the case of a typical snowslide. The mountainside near their camp was at an incline slightly less than 30 degrees, the minimum needed to start an avalanche. According to evidence from the scene, the crew tried to escape the camp roughly 9 hours after pitching the tent. A doctor who examined the bodies compared their wounds to what he'd seen in car crash victims. The causes of death didn't align with typical avalanche accidents, which usually kill people by suffocation. And even if an avalanche had driven the party away after battering some of them, that wouldn't explain the radioactive clothing, the sickly orange skin, or the missing eyes and tongue. A revised version of the avalanche theory concluded that a slab avalanche sparked the Dyatlov Pass tragedy. These rare avalanches occur when a layer of snow close to the surface comes loose and rolls down an incline in large chunks, which would have left behind less evidence, and the fast-moving snow blocks would have been capable of injuring some campers without smothering them. Russia's new report was undoubtedly more convincing, but scientists needed to figure out how to recreate what happened on that fateful night to convince skeptics of the slab avalanche theory. Johann Gorm's impression of the 2013 Disney film Frozen differed from most viewers. Many people saw a light-hearted musical for kids. He saw the potential for scientific discovery, which makes sense considering what Gorm does for a living. The Swiss scientist studies avalanches and how they act under different conditions. After watching the animated characters escape from snow falling down a CGI mountain, he started planning a trip to Hollywood. Gorm met with Frozen snow effects specialist, and got permission to use the actual code used to animate snow in the movie. He worked with Alexander Puzrin, a fellow avalanche researcher from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. Then reported their findings in a study published in the Journal of Communications Earth and Environment in January 2021. With information from crash tests General Motors conducted on cadavers in the 1970s, the researchers demonstrated how a slab avalanche could cause traumatic injuries. Their computer simulation showed that a block of ice smaller than an SUV would have been capable of breaking the bones of the Dyatlov campers while they slept on their backs. The fractures wouldn't necessarily have caused instant death, which would explain how the injured made it so far from the camp before succumbing to the damage. The study also calculates how a type of wind known as katabatic wind may have been the catalyst. There was no snowfall recorded in the area the night the party left their tent, so something else must have added pressure to the mountainside for an avalanche to occur. Katabatic winds are fast-moving, downward gusts propelled by gravity. Such winds could potentially transport enough snow to cause what looks like a spontaneous avalanche. This would have been possible even with the site's relatively shallow incline. Though 30 degrees is considered the threshold for avalanches, snowslides have been known to occur at lesser angles. Some data supports avalanches at close to 15 degrees under the right conditions. The base layer of snow discovered beneath the camp consisted of depth hoar, or sugar snow. These large, grainy snow crystals don't adhere easily to each other. In other words, the conditions at the Dyatlov campsite may have been the perfect recipe for a lethal avalanche. Gorm's and Puzrin's simulations may solve the angle, the delay, and the traumatic injuries often cited by critics of the avalanche theory. But other mysteries of the Dyatlov Pass incident are harder to run through a computer model. Many questions still surround the tragedy. Why were the bodies discolored? Why were some missing eyes and a tongue? Where did the radiation on their clothes come from? The fact that their skin had turned an orangish color could be caused by them starting to mummify, considering they were found months after their disappearance. The length of time they were outside would also explain why soft tissue was missing from some of their faces. The eyes and tongues of dead bodies are easy pickings for scavengers. Although, the radiation may be the most controversial detail, and the hardest one to decipher. One theory states that the thorium in the gas lanterns they brought with them was powerful enough to make their clothes slightly radioactive. It's also possible that the tiny amounts resulted from the bodies lying in direct sunlight for months. We may have a possible explanation for how the Dyatlov party perished, but how they spent their last moments alive is still unclear. There is a good chance we may never actually know the details outlining the mystery. I'd love to hear your theories in the comments below. Do you think this has a scientific explanation? Or maybe an out-of-this-world one?
Please click the subscribe button so you can keep up to date with my channel. Thanks for watching and take care.